Hello, welcome to another how-to video with Ucidity, the HubSpot experts. We are a HubSpot Platinum Partner. We help businesses to be able to implement HubSpot, optimize HubSpot, and then do all the automation in the back end. So a lot of the technical side of HubSpot. Now, what we're looking at in today's video is how to migrate data from an existing live system into HubSpot, or an existing system into HubSpot. So if you've ever been down the path where you've had spreadsheets galore, you're trying to merge spreadsheets, you've finally got all what you thought your data was all clean, you've done an import into HubSpot, and then it's giving you like a whole bunch of errors, and you've got to find out what those errors were, or importantly, you've then got to write all these complex formulas to get the data exactly right so that the right data goes into the right field. This is the video for you. So let's dive in and have a look at what we're going to cover in this specific video. So the first one is we're going to be focusing on a system called n8n. So we're going to look at what is n8n, how it differs from a normal HubSpot data import, what its limitations are, and where it's best used, and then sort of next steps. So let's jump into n8n. I'm just going to show you a screen really quickly. So this thing here is n8n. It looks a little bit like spaghetti, but it makes sense. If ever you've used a HubSpot workflow, it's very, very, very similar. If you've used Zapier or Make, very, very similar to that. But this is a thing that pulls information from a spreadsheet, goes through a few business rules, and then it updates the row to say, well, this record was successful, this record had an error, so I can then go through a bit later and just focus on the errors, knowing that all of this information was correct. It also has a layer that runs sort of like business rules over the top. So this thing here is that it looks at the information. In this specific thing, we're migrating data from a system called ServiceMate. ServiceMate is like a day-to-day system that tradies tend to use, where they can record their time, they can take photos of a job, they can create a quote on the spot, they can geolocate where they are. It'll send text messages when someone's close to an address, or let them know that they're 10 minutes away. It's a fantastic system for people that are on the road a lot. And what we're doing is we're helping a client to be able to migrate or synchronize data from their ServiceMate system into HubSpot. Now they're using HubSpot because they're growing their business, they're doing a way more marketing now. They need a more robust system because ServiceMate is not very strong on the marketing side, and we're helping them migrate that system over. So one of the things here, when I go to what we're importing, this is all the data we're importing, is we've got a date that the thing was created, the status from ServiceMate, when the quote was created, when the work order was created, so when the job's actually supposed to happen, whether it was a date that's been invoiced, and then based on these, we can then have a look at this and say, well, it was quoted, but it never got to a work order and it never got invoiced, then it's either sitting at the quote sent stage, or because of this thing here, I actually know that the quote never got approved. So it's sitting like a close loss stage, essentially. So what I can do is then use this thing here to add some business rules and say, well, okay, if it got all the way to it was paid for and an invoice was generated and all that, then we can push it through closed one. If it was, we just look at the unsuccessful case. If it was way back here in the quote sent, so if we're looking here and the job status is like, if it's blank or something else, then I know it's only got to the quote sent stage. So if you can imagine doing that through a spreadsheet, I actually gave it a go, and you can do a whole bunch of if statements, but here's another way, cleaner way of doing this. So this is n8n. If you have used other automation tools in the past, like Zapier or Make or one of those types of tools, it is slightly different. The main difference is that n8n, you can actually load it on your own infrastructure. So if you've got AWS, Azure, a local server somewhere, you can run this system on your local server, and no longer do you have to sit there and guess like Zapier and say, well, if I'm migrating 100,000 records, how much is that going to cost me in Zapier? When you're running n8n, if you're running it on your own servers, it doesn't cost you a cent. So that's probably the main difference between Zapier and those sorts of systems. So that's n8n. Now, how does n8n differ from a HubSpot data import? So I'm going to bring up the HubSpot data import again. So this is our demo system. And I've got some examples of some past imports that we've run. So as you can see, we've got like 100,000 records. We've done some pretty big data migrations imports over the years. And what you can see here is we've got out of this import, there was 37-ish thousand new records, 15 records updated, 14,000 new associations, but this one here is the killer, 100,000 errors. So we know why. It was sort of a first run. We did that and we just had to adjust a few settings and whatnot. So it was sort of expected we were going to get some errors. But if you can imagine if this was a live migration and you've just done it, you've imported it, you've hit the import button, and then you've come back and you're like, 100,000 errors? What am I supposed to do now? And by this time, the data's live, it's in your production environment, and it's like, what do we do? So HubSpot data import is fantastic for a lot of use cases. You can even use like these data studio syncs and app syncs to synchronize data. Where it starts to get tricky is if there's unexpected information in your data import. So like here, if someone doesn't have an email address, I just tell it to go, all right, just get the next record. We're not even going to try and go any further. I can just tell it to skip over that record. And other types of things like maybe it's trying to, if you've got a drop-down list, say you've got 3 options, and the option in your table or your spreadsheet doesn't have that option, once again, it's going to error. Now, as I said, HubSpot has come a long way to be able to fix those types of things, but there's still a lot of use cases where it's really hard to migrate information across. So what we do is we build these relatively simple systems here. This has taken around about up to an hour. We know what we're doing, but it basically goes along and says, right, get me the information, get me the latest information from the production system. So as you can imagine, if you're migrating data across, this export might have happened 3 weeks ago, and then when I'm doing the import that goes in here is 3 weeks old. So somehow we've then got to have another export for that 3-week gap to try and make up for that data gap. When we run migrations from these types of systems, it goes, get me the next record, pull the latest information from the production system, and then push that into HubSpot. So it's accurate within a second or two, rather than 3 weeks. So this is another reason why we do these migrations. The next thing is that, say we need to run another synchronization. Say we're doing the first 1,000 records, jump in, do the testing, get the team to test it, is it right, etc. We can then set up this system. So if I go down here, at the moment we're just sort of pulling in 10 rows at a time, just to do like a little bit of get the 10 rows test, get the 10 rows test, just to do a little bit of testing. As the system we increase confidence in it, we then push that up to 50, 100, and then we do the whole lot, and we do return all and do the whole lot. So it allows us to sort of trickle a data migration in. Now, doing that with spreadsheets, you've got to do multiple exports and delete things and do differentiation. It once again can be a bit of a nightmare. So it allows us to trickle the migration in. Like I said, it then goes through, it interrogates the latest production system, it interrogates HubSpot, it finds out that, okay, well, if there's no deal that exists there, it just goes off and creates a deal, because there's already deals in the system. It's sort of half migrated, so this is fills in the gaps, and this system says, like, if I find a deal, update it. If I don't find a deal, create it, and then move forward. And then if there's any sort of errors, it updates the spreadsheet to say there's an error, let's jump in at a later date, and then run through this whole thing again to refine the system and then fix those errors. If it's successful, then it updates that row in the spreadsheet and goes to the next row. So we can sort of trickle information in. We can have all these complex business rules to set the fields exactly to the value that they need to be based on certain filters or, like I said, business rules. And then it updates every row that is successful. So if you imagine trying to do that with a data import and just say, hey, just give me a spreadsheet of the rows. You can sort of do this, but give me a spreadsheet of the rows that weren't successful, and then just press a button and say, run it again. HubSpot won't allow you to do that in its current form. So, so where its limitations are, if you're migrating like hundreds of thousands of records, you might it might be slow doing it this way. So you're probably better off doing, getting like a data migration expert who does more of the spreadsheet style data or pushes them into a middleware database and then pushes it into HubSpot. If you've got like hundreds of different spreadsheets everywhere that you're trying to migrate, n8n is probably going to hit some limitations. And definitely if you're migrating from a system that doesn't have an API, well, yeah, unfortunately you're stuck because this system does rely on an API. So where it is really good is that if you've got, I mean, the biggest one we've done so far is about 10,000 records. It handled that really nicely. Yes, we've had to basically run it over a period of time, so over a weekend was good. But the good thing about that is that it can run over the weekend. We don't have to sit there and look at it and sort of wait for errors to appear. We can then have another system that then pulls in this part of the spreadsheet, refine some of these systems just to cater for the errors that happened, and then just run it again and it'll run those errors. So like I said, if you've got two API systems, you're migrating south of, I would say, 100,000 records, then this system's going to be potentially going to be really good for you, and especially if you've got some complex business rules where it requires some setting of information to get the data right. Okay, so next steps, if you would love to reach out and have a chat, we would always love to have a chat. So you just go to ucidity.com.au/n8n and it'll tell you how to make the next step, even if it's just a quick chat to say, hey, is n8n worth doing for your business? It's great for migration. It's great for synchronization if you need to get a system live back to HubSpot, and n8n is great for all sorts of automations. So a lot of cutting out of steps, like I said, the auto creative quote. If that is of interest to you, please jump to this website page here. Thanks again for watching. If you like and subscribe, that will really help get this to more people. We're on a mission to help people be able to get more out of their HubSpot. We see businesses who have come to us and they're almost going to switch it off. What we do is we jump in, optimize the HubSpot, get it up and running super efficiently, get their team getting the most use from it. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what platform they use as long as they're getting better results in their sales, their marketing, their customer service, and that's what we love doing with HubSpot. So if that's of interest to you, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video. Thanks again for watching.